there is also an angle of Wings of Ebony where you talk about privilege and the importance of being an ally. So explain how that's in the book Wings of Ebony, which is available now, right?
Yes, available now and an instant New York Times bestseller.
Oh
Um,
my gosh, good for you. Can we give a round of applause? Do we have the sound effect? That's amazing.
Thank
That's hard
you.
to do.
Yeah,
That's
I was
very,
very
very hard to do.
shocked and excited.
Yeah, that's
So it's
great.
the
So,
New York Times in the indie bestseller list right when it came out, or right like the first week of sales. So that was amazing.
wow.
So privilege. I know that every single reader reading this book is looking for a different thing, right? I definitely wanted Wings of Ebony to be a mirror for my community, but I also realize a lot of people picking up this book will be picking it up as a window into my community, and so I put something in my narrative for them. Rue's best friend Bree is gray, but it's coded white in the book. It's a made up magical world, and so the non-black people, they have this sort of like grayish skin tone, and they're just paler, and it's just very clear that they're not black. And Bree is a very good friend to Rue, my main character, who the story is told from Rue's perspective. So you're in her shoes, you're feeling her pain, you're loving who she loves, you're wanting her to win, and then you have this best friend who the reader also sort of roots for too, because they love Rue and you love Rue, so you're like, hey, I love Bree by extension. But I wanted to use her character instructively, and I want to be careful of spoilers here because there's a huge moment in the book that is very talked about that I want to not spoil for readers. But I wanted to make sure that people didn't assume that just because Bree was Rue's best friend that she didn't make mistakes. I wanted to make their friendship reflective of what it's like when you have a different lived experience with someone else, and sort of the bumps along the way, and an example of how to handle those. I'm hoping, again, with the curriculum piece, that this is something teachers can use in classrooms, because students are processing what's happening in the world right now. They're processing what we just came through in 2020. They may not be vocalizing. Kids can be, it can look like they're absorbed in their PS5 and TikTok, but they're processing even subliminally. So I try to put a lot in there to be a bit instructive, but it's very, subtle, because at the end of the day, like, readers go to a book for a good story. And so I want to make sure that they're engaged in a fun page turner, and like they're really invested in who's going to win. There's lots of battle scenes, which I think readers get really excited about because it's very action packed. But I dot in those notes, and I'm very encouraged at some of the conversations coming out by seeing sort of the challenges that Bree faces as a character to understand Rue's life, because she grew up in a completely different way. And I think it's worth saying Bree is not sort of this like rich, out of touch character. In the magical world, Bree, who is basically the white character in the book, she is not from a family of like financial privilege. And I think that that is a very unique juxtaposition that I'm hoping is very much stimulates some good dialogue.
If you're just tuning in, we're talking to JL. She is the author of the New York Times bestseller. I'm adding that because you just told me right now, which is amazing. Wings of Ebony. Again, y'all are always asking me, what kind of books can I have my kids read, and this is one of those books. And her being a former teacher, there is a level of history in there as well too. Maybe a good kickstart for your child. I want to ask you this though, JL. If you would have had a book like this when you were a young girl, how would it have impacted you if you were 10, 11 years old, 12, 13 years old, and there was this book called Wings of Ebony came out and you saw characters who looked like you? How would that have impacted you as a young person?
Oh, it would have changed my life. Understand too that I went to a private school for a bit, and I was one of three Black children in the entire school. I was there on a scholarship. I went to school with some of the wealthiest children in Houston, CEOs' kids. And that was not me. I was there on a scholarship that my mama begged the principal for. And she was a really kind lady, really kind Black woman. And she was like, let's do it. I see so much promise in this kid. And I just remember in those formative years, really engaging in that space in a way, trying to figure out where I fit, trying to understand. And I mean, I was young. This is like elementary school. So these are not super, well developed thoughts, but all of this processing again with kids, a lot of it is subconscious and repressed things even. These are things that I've realized as I've sat with them over the years. But I was trying to figure out how do I engage in that space as I was developing a sense of even like things like, am I pretty? These are things that kids are thinking about, like little, 7 and 8-year-old girls who are trying to figure out, do I want to braid my hair today? Do I want to put it in a ponytail? They're thinking about, well, what looks pretty? What looks nice? And so as I was developing the sense of my identity and how my identity engages in the world, it was a challenge to be in a place where no one looked like me. There were two, but no one came from where I came from, surely. And the books that we were reading in the classes did not reflect my life. We read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. So
Oh
the
God.
depiction of the Black child there was like, okay, so is this what they see me as? And that was sort of the norm. Like if I could have
Yeah.
picked up a book like Wings of Ebony and met Rue and saw how incredibly unapologetic she is in her Blackness and how proud she is of her inner city home, I would have been a much more confident child. And
Mm,
who knows how that would have affected my grades and my social circles and my sense of self-worth and identity. It's really, really powerful and life changing when a kid can see themselves on the pages of a book. And then I think also for the other kids in the classroom who have a window in this community, they shouldn't just have the Huck Finn version of Black people in their class. You know what I mean?
yeah, absolutely. I can recall when I was a kid, we were reading Shakespeare. And my teachers, when I was very young, I was going to a white school in Washington State. And my mother eventually made me go back to Philadelphia with my father because she felt like it was more important for me to be around people who looked like me. But I can recall when I was reading Julius Caesar and Hamlet, they thought I was just dumb. But it wasn't that. It's just that I just couldn't absorb these people. I understood what was on the page. It wasn't that complicated, but I just couldn't absorb these freaking people in E2, Brutus, and the Ides of March, and it was ridiculous. So I was a smart kid, but I just couldn't. My brain was not able to absorb this. So I would go home and watch LL Cool J videos. I would go home and look for something that I can absorb. So what's cool about your book is that, a kid can have this in their backpack.
That
Yeah.
just, man, that's everything right there. But I'm just so grateful at sort of how there's so much rallying around this book and what it can do, because at the end of the day that's what the book is about. I realized, like, if Rue could make a child believe they're unstoppable, she could change the world. And so
That's
that's
right.
what it is for me. So it's get the book in kids hands, get them reading is the goal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Definitely, definitely, definitely. Well, I want to thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Y'all make sure you check out Wings of Ebony by JL. Pick it up now. It's good for I'm sure it's good for grown folks too. I mean, grown
Oh,
folks love Harry Potter. Yeah.
absolutely good for adults. Very good. There are book clubs happening on Clubhouse and such that people can engage into if they want to connect to discuss, with very, very good conversation piece for book clubs.
Well, I gotta say, I've never read a fantasy book. I refuse to read Harry Potter. I barely got to the movies, but I'm gonna read this book. I'm gonna read. I've
You're gonna
never
love
read fantasy. Yeah,
you're
I'm
gonna
gonna read it. I'm gonna check it out because I've never read this genre. I just I just couldn't get into Harry
I
Potter.
this one though, this one though, I will say, and I've had several people who blurbed the book who said, I don't read fantasy, but I read this. I had a teacher sent me a picture of a student 2 days ago, and she was like, no, miss, I don't read fantasy. I only like contemporary. And she was like, well, read the first chapter. She finished it the same day. And she said it's her favorite book ever now.
Oh wait, you know a book that had an impact on me, but I was in my 20s when I read it, but it came out when I was young. Octavia Butler.
Oh,
Remember that? She was
yeah,
sci-fi. That might have been a little bit, that was too grown for a kid. But
yeah.
it came out when I was a kid, but I didn't read it until my 20s. Kindred, Parable of the Talents, Parable of the Sower. Not young adult, but I'm just thinking I just want to give some credit to the late
Yeah,
great
no, absolutely.
Octavia Butler. Yeah, really did.
Absolutely, absolutely,
Yeah.
the queen, yes, and
Yeah.
I books like Wings of Ebony can be a segue into that, because again, you're
Yeah.
bridging sort of that, and young adult is such a new genre, like relatively new. there's something now for teens to sort of pull them into that. And that's sort of where I found my sweet spot, is really drawing on contemporary readers who don't think they love fantasy, and then
Yeah.
introducing them into something. So I'm
We've
excited.
come a long way since the days of Nancy Drew. I could just tell
That's
you
it.
that much.
That's it. Yes.